maybe we can start by asking you, yeah, what is trauma?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say thank you, Esther. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm looking forward to talking with you about all of this stuff. And as you know, and I think as everybody else who's listening knows, in a relatively brief period of time, and we'll have a conversation, we'll go back and forth, we'll talk about some things, but in the end, what I want people to remember is that just about everything I bring up and talk about, there are other places, either in our resources online or other books or other professionals, where you can get a little bit of a deeper dive into these concepts. And so I hope people kind of just think about this almost like an infomercial, just to give people a little bit of hope that there are ways to understand how human beings work, how the brain works, how the brain changes, that should leave parents struggling with the child to be hopeful. Because what we do know is that, no matter what part of the brain we're talking about, change is possible. And no matter how...
I'm so happy you say that.
Yeah, well, it's very true. And I think one of the challenges that's happened one of the things that happens with a lot of our therapeutic approaches is that they're not getting to the parts of the brain or the networks in the brain that are causing the problems. And I think once people step back and think a little bit about neurodevelopment, neuroplasticity, and think about, in some cases, that what would be considered unconventional approaches, you then begin to see that there's a reason why all this hard work and interventions have made minimal progress. And it's because you're not addressing the part of the brain that is involved in the functional deficit.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And how come that, like, at one point parents know about it and then the regular care still don't know about it?
Yeah. No, that's, and you mentioned this in the introduction, that one of the hardest things, I think, is that even though there's this hopeful biology, I mean, we know that people can change, most of our systems are not designed to take advantage of those potentials. And so many of the things that we do, and that are part of the mainstream educational practice, mainstream therapeutic practice, are not effective for these kids that we work with that are impacted by very, particularly early attachment experience, problems. And, now the field is changing; it's getting better, but in the U.S. and other places, I mean, we have colleagues all over the world, and who are, we're all learning from each other. But most of us, when we talk about the rest of the community that we're part of, only a fraction of the practitioners understand these things.
Yeah, but is it very difficult to understand, or don't they get access to the right information? Because I understand it as a parent because I started looking for my daughter.
Yeah.
So,
well, part of the dilemma, and I've written a little bit of a commentary about this, but part of the dilemma is that once people in any discipline, let's take the discipline of medicine, once they develop their view of the world, once they think things work a certain way, and then a new idea comes along, it doesn't matter what the idea is, the initial response is to ignore it, because anything that challenges the way they do things, they just ignore. But then if it gets to the point where you can't ignore it, then they attack it. And so they'll attack people that are using these new ideas, and then ultimately they'll do what we call co-op. They'll bring the ideas in, and they'll claim that these are their ideas, and which is fine. But
it sounds familiar. Yeah.
And that happens in all systems. That happens in all systems and in all change, really. But the sad reality for families and for kids is that that process takes about 20 years. And so if you look at, and people have done research on this, that you can establish a best practice, a new innovation, and have it proven scientifically, but it takes about 20 years before that new thing becomes standard of practice. And so you sort of were struggling, again, you mentioned that you have a child who had some issues.
Yeah.
So you sort of were in this unfortunate time when you started looking for help. Probably nobody knew about this. And very, very few people were in a position to go, oh, I understand what's going on and let's do this. And so, like many parents that we run into, you kind of go from one clinician to another and you sort of seek out helpful things. And one person says it's this and another person says that. And it's very confusing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. In my search for answers for my daughter, it took me to the States.
Oh, really?
It took me to, Healing Heart. Do you know Nancy Thomas?
I do. Oh, I mean, yes. I don't know her, but I know of that work. Yeah.
That's how I got to know about your, we always call it the 6 R's of Bruce Perry, so one of your tools. That's how I got to know your knowledge. I go back every year and help to contribute what she did for my child. And I help on those Healing Heart camps. She does these attachment camps.
Oh.
And I'm like, the knowledge is there, the vision is there, but we need to expand it.
Yeah, very true.
And that goes slow, especially for the parents that are really struggling.